Matthew, just a little bit about the Bible, because we're starting the first book of the New Testament. And the church, and I'm talking about 200 or 100 AD, 200 AD, whenever all the books were written and they were gathering them together, they chose out of the letters that they had for the New Testament to make the whole Bible. Okay? And there are other books out there that claim to be like the Gospel of Peter and the Gospel of Thomas, all these, and they may have been written by those individuals, or they may not have, we don't know. But these were made into what we call today the Holy Bible, the New Testament, the new part of it. It starts out again, as the very beginning, Matthew was a tax collector. He was also a Jew. So that made him very hated by his fellow Jewish people, because he was helping the Romans fleece the people. Because the way a tax collector worked, I think we've talked about this before, Rome needed so much taxes. Well, the tax collector, he didn't get paid by Rome. So however much taxes he could raise from them, he would add 10% or whatever for his salary, for what he wanted. Now, we don't know exactly. He may have been fair about it. Some of the others not. We know Zacchaeus, when he said, when he met the Lord, he was a tax collector also, and he said, whatever I've done, I'll restore fourfold. So we know he did some, because he's going to be restoring some. So we don't know how much that was. There wasn't, it's kind of like you're in an office and you can charge, it'd be like our government, you know, I want $1 million a day. Okay, sign right here, you know, no problem. But that's kind of the way it was back then. You could set your own standard. Now, I'm sure they would get outlandish, but whatever they could gather, the people would get all upset with them, and that's the way we saw in the Chosen. Everybody was throwing stuff at Matthew and spitting on him and everything. It probably happened like that. He was probably one of the, shunned. So that was very surprising to the disciples when Jesus chose him to be one of the disciples. And Matthew has a distinction of him and only one other disciple wrote the books, John. Matthew and John were the ones that wrote 2 of what we call the Gospels. And Mark wasn't an apostle. He followed afterward. He was a young person, we know, and he probably knew Jesus and even saw him. And Luke, he followed Paul a lot. And both of those were a little bit later than Jesus. They may have known of Jesus, they may have seen him, but they weren't of the 12 apostles. So Matthew starts out, and in his lesson that he has here in the first chapter, he's proving a genealogy. He's showing a genealogy back through to one person. Well, many people, but he's trying to show it to David, and he's trying to show it to Abraham, because the promises were to Abraham and to David. And of course, he was the tribe of Judah also, so that's part of it. So it says Matthew 1 through 17 is the record of the genealogy. It's actually, so be at somebody's father is so father. And then from 18 to chapter 2 and 23, we have the record of Jesus' birth and how it recorded the origins of his birth. And the entire Gospel of Matthew is the record of the history. Matthew doesn't go into a lot of detail on some things. Luke does. Okay, there's more written about the birth of Jesus in Luke. Not so much in Matthew. Matthew just kind of throws it out there. There are several things, and you can read through all this, but it's trying to summarize it a little bit. Matthew, he is writing in Hebrew for the most part, and he talks about the Jewish customs as if his audience is Jewish. So he doesn't explain some things. Luke goes back and he explains a little bit more. Luke is a medical doctor, so he's used to explaining procedures, and especially to somebody, now I'm getting ready to do this, and I'm going to stick this up your nose, and it's going to hurt, so you can kind of get you ready, or it's not going to hurt, whatever. So Luke kind of is a little more literate, but Matthew gets to the point, and he hammers through. There are several scriptures that are only in Matthew. It's not in the other Gospels. And that's kind of, the first three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are what they call the synoptic Gospels because they are the most alike. They don't know exactly. They think Mark was the first book that was actually written down. So we don't know who was the author. I mean, we know Mark was the author, but since he wasn't there through some of the history, his must have been through somebody else. Some of the other apostles, maybe Peter, maybe Mary may have told him some things. We don't know, but Mark was what they called, there's actually a book prior to Mark they call Q. It's a source. And we don't know who that source was. But then Matthew and Luke followed after that, and John's letter came even after that. Okay, we skip all the way over to, well, I'll read the first one. It says, 1 is the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. That's in the very first page. And that's what Matthew's setting forth, that he's going to prove or show this is a lineage of Jesus, and it's going to go back, and it's proving his kingly authority. Okay, the kings was David. He's of that lineage, and all the way back to the patriarch Abraham. Where Luke, when he gives his genealogy, it goes through Mary's side, and it doesn't go. So it's proving his bloodline and who goes through that bloodline. So we see both sides of the story if you use both genealogies, and I was going to get that, and I just kind of ran out of time. I'll try to get it maybe for next week to see if we can have the lineages and how it is side by side, because actually it's pretty close. They're related back, not too far back. Okay, of course that's like with anybody else, but they're distant related, but it follows the same kind of direction until it reaches a certain point. So I'll try to get that and see if I can figure that out. I'm sure somebody's done it on the internet, and I'll just find it, print it off for you and bring it next time. But I thought that would be interesting. Matthew, he stops at Abraham. Luke, when we start looking at Luke, he goes all the way back to Adam. So that's another difference between the genealogies. I'm going to read the first through 6. Abraham begat Isaac. Isaac begat Jacob. Jacob begat Judas and his brethren. And Judas begat Phares and Zerah of Thamar. And Phares begat Esrom. And Esrom begat Amram. And Amram begat Abinadab. And Abinadab begat Nason. And Nason begat Solomon. And Solomon begat Boaz, which is Boaz of Rachab. And Boaz begat Obed of Ruth. And Obed begat Jesse. And Jesse begat David the king. And David the king begat Solomon of her that had been the wife of Uriah. Okay? And that's all on page 4. Now, a couple things. You notice Matthew's using each one of these. But for some reason, when he gets to Phares, he tells Phares and Zerah. Judas beget two lines. Both of those, if you look into them, and it has it back here, I believe. I'll maybe jump into it. Yeah, Tamar sold herself as a prostitute to her father-in-law Judah, and to bring forth Phares and Zerah. Okay, if you go back and remember the story that we talked about, that Judah was supposed to find him another wife, and he didn't, and so she played the harlot. Judah slept with her. That's in this story. So that has to do with something, and we don't really know what, other than that it's just mentioned. It's a difference. And then it goes all the way down to David, King David, and he's the only one, even though there are a bunch more kings in here, he's the only one mentioned as king. And then the way he mentions it is David is the king that begat Solomon of her that had been the wife of Uriah. To me, this is pointing out that we're living in a fallen world, but God still can make use of what happened. David, of course, slept with Bathsheba. The first baby died. After that, he had another baby. She had another baby, Solomon, which was the king, and he came on and the lineage continued. All right?
Well, we can look at that and compare some of that situation where, God used different people that weren't perfect
Right.
back then. I mean, and he can still use people today that's not perfect and has
Right.
a past that's not exactly a Christian perfect person, but he can still use people that have made mistakes and isn't perfect.
Well, even some of these in here, I'll just talk about it when it comes back up in here. But there are, we'll finish through this and then we'll talk about it. 7 through, how about 10, Brother Epperson?
Sure enough.
If you want to, I can read them all. If you
Read
want.
them. You can do better with it.
And Asa beget Josaphat. Josaphat beget Joram. Joram beget Ozias. Ozias beget Jotham. Jotham beget Achaz. Achaz beget Ezekias. And Ezekias beget Manasseh. And Manasseh beget Amon. And Amon beget Josiah. I'll go ahead and read the rest of them. And Josiah beget Jeconias and his brethren about the time they were carried away to Babylon. So that's around Daniel's time. Okay? And his brethren about the time they were carried away. And after they were brought to Babylon, Jeconias beget Saliathil, and Saliathil beget Zerubbabel, and Zerubbabel beget Abihud, and Abihud beget Eliakim, and Eliakim beget Azor, and Azor beget Sadok, and Sadok beget Achim, and Achim beget Eliud, and Eliud beget Eleazar, and Eleazar beget Mathan, and Mathan beget Jacob, and Jacob beget Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was Jesus born, who is called Christ.
Did you get tired?
Nah.
Good
You
job.
know what? If I ever go to Israel, I'm going to church. Try an Israelite down and say, listen, this Jerry and
Yeah.
did that sound strange to you? Just you guys,
Well, it's funny because you read through this, and some of these are like, we've never heard of these things, some of these names. Yeah, some of the names you have heard, they're slightly different than what the Old Testament has. But that's because he's translating it a little different. Matthew is. And we see that in the New Testament. Some of those are that way. Isaiah is Isaiah.
Yeah.
Things like that. That some are just, is it tomato? Is it tomato? I mean, potato. I'm not really sure. So that kind of throws people off. But we do see as we go through this lineage, what he says here does not say that Jesus was the son of Joseph. Did you catch that? And Jacob beget Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was Jesus born. He still goes back to Mary. Jesus was born of Mary. Joseph was a part of it, but he didn't have the main player in there, okay? So it's proving not his blood lineage, which is through Mary, and Luke will go through that, but he's proving his kingly Mary. Now, there are some, let's see, I think it's in the next. Yeah, so I won't read that yet. But what I will write is the next one. If we go on, 4 women are mentioned in here. Tamar is not really mentioned, but her kids are. Well, Tamar. So it mentions 4 women in this genealogy. So Tamar, she's the one that we talked about already. Rahab, which is, I think, Rachab, what we would, Rachab. I think that may be the Rachab that they said. She was actually a Gentile. She was the one in Jericho. Remember when the spies went over and found somebody to take them in? Rahab was a prostitute. She took them in, and because of that, because she believed in the slaves that was there, the Hebrews, that they would protect her, she was saved. Ruth is also in there. We see that because she was a Moabite, not a Jew. So each one of these, it's not his lineage goes down, and it's pointing out it's not just through the Jews that this came about. All right? And then, of course, the wife, Bathsheba, of who was Uriah's husband. Uriah was her husband. But he was a Hittite. I don't know if, it doesn't say if she was or not. I don't think she was. I think she was Jewish. But one of the things that, I don't know if you guys found out, but when we were at the shepherd's field there in Bethlehem, where the angels came, showed the shepherds, unto this child is born, unto this, it's shown in Luke. That is Boaz's field. It's the same field that was from back then, where Ruth was found and where all this. So I just thought that was pretty neat that was in that same area that he owned part of that. We got a little book, and she mentioned a lot of stuff, but I'm going through the book now to try to make sense of things. Okay, and then like we said, it talks about the phraseology that it's clearly showing the legal ancestry of Jesus, and through Joseph, he was the legal husband of Mary, not Jesus' father. So verse 17 says, and all the generations from Abraham to David are 14, and from David until the carrying away into Babylon are 14 generations, and from carrying away into Babylon unto Christ are 14 generations. Now, if you go back and lay out the history of it, it's not 14 generations. If you're calling father-son a generation, it's not. What they do, and sometimes we see this happening, we'll see it, sometimes they're called a son. It's really their grandson. And they just do it because, yes, they are a son of a son. And so it talks about, in Matthew 1 and 8, it says, Joram begot Uzziah. This was Uzziah, who was the king, who was struck with leprosy for daring to enter the temple as a priest to offer incense. Uzziah was not the immediate son of Joram. There were 3 kings between them, Ahaz, Joash, and Amaziah. It is observed that the omissions of this kind are not uncommon in the Jewish genealogies. So in our thinking, well, that's 17, you know. But they're trying to make it even, so they cut some out. And if you go back and look at those three kings, they're kind of you want to forget them anyway because they're evil. You know, as the black sheep, we don't want to talk about them. Just saying. That's kind of, I can understand why they do, but they do that in more than one place. Matthew's not the only one that does that. But it did nothing by leaving out these generations. It just showing them that this is the lineage, that where it comes to. And here it says that this is where we come to the differences between Matthew and Luke. Talks about Mary going down through Joseph. Luke recorded the genealogy of Mary being as the son of Joseph. And that was, he began with Jesus and followed the line back up all the way to Adam, starting from the unmentioned. He didn't mention Mary, but that's pretty much what it says. And this is, here's some more on that. It says down at the bottom of 8, each genealogy is the same as it records the line from Adam or Abraham all the way down to David. But at David, the two genealogies separated. If we remember the list of David's sons, 2 Samuel 5, we see that Satan focused his attention on the descendants of the royal line through Solomon. And this was a reasonable strategy. He was going to try to attack Solomon. According to 1 and 6, Joseph's line went through Solomon, and therefore Jehoiakim, the cursed one, Jesus was the legal son of Joseph, but not the blood son of Joseph. So the curse on Jehoiakim did not affect him. Joseph did not contribute any of the blood of Jesus, but he did contribute his legal standing as a descendant of the royal line to Jesus. Mary's line, the bloodline of Jesus, did not go through Solomon, but through a different son of David named Nathan. Mary was therefore not a part of the blood curse on the line of Jehoiakim. And the Israelites are very particular on their history. They want to go back. I was reading and even talking a little bit about them, and what I understood is we talked about the very ultra-Orthodox Jews, the Hasidic ones, the ones that were, they're supposed to be of the tribe of Levi, is what I understood from talking with them over there. I mean, with our guide and stuff, and our pastor that was over there. So I'm like,
I've heard that also.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, boy, you guys really keep track through World War II and all, all this and all. That's amazing.
But to most people, even to us, some of this stuff doesn't really make any difference.
It doesn't.
Because it doesn't resonate. But if you was a Jew, some of this stuff was very important.
Yeah.
The legal lineage and
all that. It's just like this. If you're going back and somebody's contesting that I own some land from my grandfather, I just found, and I don't know if it's him because names are, I don't have a date with it, so I don't know if it's him or not. But I found a probate will from a Wiley Duval. Well, that was my great grandfather, my grandfather. But he died when Dad was 6, I think. So I don't think it's him because he would have not had a will at that time. He was so young, relatively. I don't think he would have had a will. But that's just the way it challenges it. And in our society, what we do is we have the abstract, the title, that takes, oh yeah, he owned it, the first person that bought it, whoever, granted from it was over in Arkansas, so somebody was granted it probably from the Civil War. That's what a lot of these that I found in Arkansas was. They got 40 acres, 80 acres, 160 acres.
Some of them didn't get paid very much. So
Right. So that was part of, or they didn't even get a pension maybe.
Yeah.
And they gave that land to them as long as they homesteaded. Okay, the birth of Jesus. Verse 18, Brother Epperson.
Now the birth of Jesus was on this wise, when as her mother Mary was espoused to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with child of the Holy Ghost.
Okay. And we don't quite have the same, we talk about it in the same terms, but our terms are not quite the same. They have, the Jewish society, they have engagement, and then they have betrothal, and then they have marriage. Engagement may be an arranged, okay, my son's 5 years old and your daughter's 4 years old or 5. We'll get together. It was family type deal, and they made, okay, they'll get married when they get older. That was kind of the engagement part. And that's where they would continue on, and later on they would get engaged, get ready to get married. They called them betrothed. And this usually happened about, you were usually betrothed about a year before you were married. Okay? So in the betrothal, this is binding. It's something that they would go and approach the father of the bride and have to pay a dowry and get this all taken care of in this time frame. And then they would start planning for the wedding in advance. So this is why it says Mary was espoused to Joseph. He was already in that betrothal period. He had made that connection. Now, we don't know a lot about Joseph. Some of the history says that he was older, and some people have said that he had a previous wife, and that's where Jesus' brothers and sisters come from, that it was before he was born, before Jesus was born. Others think it was after, that Mary actually had some additional kids. And we don't know exactly. We just don't know the history of it. But we do know after he reached a certain age, somewhere after the age of 12, Joseph is not mentioned anymore. So somewhere in there he died. So it's very likely that he may have been a little bit older than Mary. And if that happened, then Mary was going to be on her own after that, time period. So before they came together to get married, as in this betrothal period, she was found with child. Okay, Joseph found out that she was with child, and it says here of the Holy Ghost is what Matthew wrote. Matthew plainly presents the virgin concept here, that she was a virgin when she was found with child. It's hard to believe. People don't believe it today. There's some people that just won't believe it. So when Joseph found out in 19, you want to read that for us, Iris?
When Joseph, her husband, being a just man and not willing to make her a public example, was minded to put her away privately.
Okay. What that means, he's going to give her a divorce. Even though they're not married, to get betrothed, it's just like what we would consider being married. So he's going to put her away or give her a writing of divorcement and not make a big deal about it, because she's going to face a lot of scrutiny. She's a young woman that is having a child, and they'll know that it's not his because the marriage hasn't happened, so they haven't had time to consummate the marriage. Okay? Because they don't, until the marriage happens, they're not going to consummate it. So it says he's going to put her away secretly. This was a particular time to put her away so she, could go back to her family and not be quite as embarrassed as what it is. Well, what happened? 21. Bertha, you want to read that on page 11? 20 and 21.
But while he thought on these things, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a dream, saying, Joseph, thou son of David, fear not to take unto thee Mary, for that which is conceived in her is the Holy Ghost, and she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save the people from their sins.
So he had an appearance of an angel.
How reassuring
Lord.
wouldn't that be?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know that the Lord did that to reassure him that, you know, she's okay. Don't put her away. She's
That's right.
fine.
That's right.
You know, I think that just is the kind of God we serve. You know, he wants to give us assurance. He wants to give us comfort. And that's what he was doing for Joseph.
Right. And of course, she probably wouldn't show for several
Yeah,
months.
Right.
There's some ladies I've seen that's 5 months pregnant. You wouldn't even know, you know. So a lot of people thinks it may have been the same angel that appeared to her in the very beginning, because she would have known. After a month, she would have known
Yeah.
something's going on. And then she went to Elizabeth, visited her cousin Elizabeth that had already been with child. She was old and had a child. And so when you stack those Bibles, what you need is a new Bible. No, another Bible. And I've seen one come out. It's chronological. It stacks them, you know, okay, here's this, here's that, here's that, in kind of chronological time to help you understand it a little bit, because it's in a different book. It's not in this book that we're talking about. But it was, you know, Mary may have told him, hey, this is what happened. I mean, she's got to come up, you know.
But still, whenever he dreamed that,
Oh, I know.
It had to make such a difference.
Oh, it did.
Yeah.
I mean, from then on, he had no doubts.
Yeah.
He had no doubts. She didn't either. And we're not talking about that tonight, but he had no doubts about it. He didn't question it. You know, like John the Baptist's father laughed, or said, you know, oh, that's crazy. That's crazy talk, you know, something like that. But he didn't. To his credit, he went ahead and he believed the angel, and because of that, it was accounted for him, you know.
Well, she had to be an exemplary woman at that point anyhow.
Right.
To where he knew it, but God was good to him and went ahead and gave him that reassurance.
Right. You know, it's one.
To me, they're both an exception.
Oh yeah.
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 I mean, it says he was a good man. He was a good godly man. He may not have been a Christian yet. You know what I mean? But yeah. But you know, and I think you made mention about it's hard to believe that virgin birth, but then you stop and say, in the beginning God said.
Right.
And that's all he had to do is
He
just
can
say
do
it.
He
Just
can
say
do whatever
it.
he
It was
wants.
done. I think a young man one time, he told his grandpa, was talking to him, he said, God can do anything he wants, anytime he wants, anywhere he wants. And that is so true.
Right. We don't have to worry. We're human. And when somebody, especially, you know, probably your child tells you, I didn't do it. Okay. Your mom's over there, and I'm right here, and something happened over there, and that's where you were at.
Well, I think about the torment that Satan would have been trying to put upon Joseph.
Yep.
And the Lord just, hey, let's put this to bed.
That's exactly what he did. He just said, don't worry about it. It'll be okay.
Don't be tormented.
And it's okay. He's got that reassurance. He's still going to get, you know, bombed by everybody on the planet because of that. But I don't know. That was, to him, settled it. 22 and 23. You got to read that for us, Janet.
Let me get my glasses lined up right.
It's on page 13.
Now all this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is God with us.
Okay. Now this is commentary from Matthew. He's going back and saying, look, this was back in the Old Testament, in the older Testament, if you're going to say it that way. And this was the prophet, prophet spoke this was going to happen. It's happened. And now, God is going to be here with us. Nowhere else, we never hear him called Emmanuel anywhere else. His name's Jesus, his name is Yeshua, but here, it's reassuring them again. Matthew's telling them, I was with the man, and he was God with us. The things that I saw, the things that happened, he became that for us. So that's a little bit, since Matthew wrote it, and of course he wrote it under the inspiration of God, of course.
In the end, the chosen, we saw Matthew as he followed the first disciples, and was he making notes or was he writing taxes?
When he was with the disciples, because the way they've written him in the script is because he was so meticulous and had such a, he was almost ADD or OCD or something that, he was calculating things like that, and even, can't think of his name now, the praetor over Capernaum, he liked him because he could figure quick, and he was quick on his feet, and he had good sense. He's a little autistic maybe because he didn't get, we don't know that from the Bible, but so yes, he was making notes.
That's what I thought he was doing, but being a tax collector, you don't know if he's adding or what.
When he left that tax booth, he left everything.
Oh.
Okay, he was no longer a tax collector because that's what they represented, and I think it's true for all the disciples. They left everything.
Yeah.
Matthew
But
had a lot.
Also, before he was disciple, he was tagging along.
Yeah, before he was tagging along, he was making notes because he was trying to see, trying to prove. First of all, he saw the miracle of the fish, and he was trying to prove, okay, how did this happen? I don't understand this, So in his mind, but afterwards, him and if you notice, John would write things down in the chosen, and that's just playing the part that we know those two apostles wrote. They didn't write the book right away, but they, just like me when I was on my trip, she said something, I better write it down. I don't know what picture I'm taking,
Well, even now, in service on Sunday mornings, I'm
Oh,
sitting
yeah.
there, I'm taking notes on that
Yeah.
bulletin,
Yeah. Our brains help if we've got some notes there with it. And it also helps me remember. Whenever I was in school, you could read something or the professor could write something on the board, but I would paraphrase it, on my own mind, and that would help set it in my mind. If I missed some notes someday, I was kind of hurt. I had to either go get somebody else's notes, which is hard to interpret usually, or, read the book and go through it and try to figure out what it was. But yes, that's the way he was doing. He was trying to get through this part of it, to record it.
I took notes, then I forget. I couldn't write fast enough.
Well, yeah.
So then I missed what was being said anyway, so I quit taking
Well,
notes.
that's why you kind of
I don't write
scratch,
fast.
Yeah,
scrabble
you
down.
just leave notes shorthand.
Yeah.
You don't know shorthand.
I like how it points this out, that where he put Matthew in there. God put the right people in those positions.
That's right.
We take Moses, the education he got through Egyptian, where he was being able to write those books later on.
Right.
God continues all through the Bible, putting people in the position.
How would you take 12 so different people to make your apostles? You had fishermen, you had taxmen, you had other people that was, we don't know exactly what they did, but they were from different paths, different parts of life. All these, it just...
Well, they were divinely inspired because, 2 or 3 times, and especially when Mary and Joseph went to Egypt, it said that this was done that Scripture might be fulfilled.
Right.
And like Brother Harold said, those men were placed in that position because Scripture had to be fulfilled.
Yes.
I mean, here's Isaiah, all of them.
He knew it. I mean, Jesus told Nathaniel, I saw you while you was under the fig tree. And he's like, whoa, I was out there by myself. How are you, how do you know? So, anyways. 24 and 25. Harold, you want to read those for us?
Then Joseph, being raised from sleep, did as the angel of the Lord had bidden him, and took unto him his wife, and knew her not till she had brought forth her firstborn son, and he called his name Jesus.
Okay, so no questions asked. Okay, I'm going to marry her. I'm going to keep her. We'll set the marriage up. May have been a more quiet marriage after that. I don't know, but he was sold out from that time, and he did not have relations with her until after Jesus was born. He didn't know her. That's what that means. So we don't know, like I said before, if they had kids before. If Joseph had kids before, or if they had kids after. Had either half brothers and sisters or full brothers and sisters. Well, it's still been half because Joseph wasn't their father, but still. So we don't know that exactly. Okay? And this goes into and talks about, this is where the Catholic Church goes into the permanent virginity of Mary, that she was a virgin for her entire life, and that's nowhere listed in here. It talks about here that came up like in, I don't know, maybe it wasn't in this one, but another one I was reading, 200 or 300 AD afterwards. It was kind of somebody added it. So it's one of those things that it's basically, it says it's unbiblical, did not appear, there it is, earlier than the 5th century after Jesus. So nowhere in it before that did that appear. And so I don't know why that happened, but they have added a lot in the years since. So. All right, well, appreciate everybody coming tonight.
Good lesson.
We'll continue on next week. I did get real quick.